Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Next Great Car Era, a podcast by EVTUNERS. Today I'm chatting with Dave Durazzo out of Oahu, Hawaii. Dave is a climate-concerned car enthusiast and currently owns a 2014 Tesla Model S, a 2014 Nissan Leaf, and the bits and pieces comprising his exciting EV conversion dubbed the Miata 1 EV. Retired Navy with no formal engineering or mechanical background outside of college, Dave has owned over 20 cars and tinkered with them over the last 30 years. This Miata Leaf motor project will be his first EV conversion. Tune in to hear more about Dave's Miata 1 EV and his progress to date. Enjoy. Let's just jump right into it. So, you're building an EV Miata. I've seen a couple other builds, that seems to be getting some traction, some interest. But I'm curious, could you pull that apart a little bit? Why a Miata?
Yeah, so I was looking at a Miata. Actually, I guess one step back. I was looking for something fun. Wanted to do a conversion. Um, Wanted to try and do it cheaply, but didn't want to end up with a four-door sedan. So looking at sports car, looking at maybe a truck pickup. Um, but yeah, definitely looking for a two-seater that had some good aftermarket support. And I have owned two Miatas previously, and
Oh,
so I was familiar
really?
with the car. And came up, and one came for sale that somebody already stripped down. So it was just a good fit to reach out, grab it for cheap, and yeah, already had some work done to it, so it felt like it was a head start. So that's how I ended up on a Miata.
Nice. That's really cool. And so you actually had driven them quite a bit. You had a sense of how it feels to be in a Miata and all of that.
I did. Yep. And so knew I wasn't looking for a rubber burner. I wasn't trying to find something that was going to be a great straight line performance, but something that was just fun, small and nimble. Didn't need to be powered super heavy, so I figured that was a good fit.
So are you familiar with the Flying Miata mod? I read about that before. Is it something
I
like
am.
you loop I'm totally going to butcher this, but do you like loop the something through the power steering, like loop that so that it doesn't circulate the same way, or somehow changes the steering of the car? Am I remembering right?
Yeah, so Flying Miata, they actually did a couple of different products, but one of the things that they do, yeah, is to help eliminate the power steering. Um, People do that for a variety of reasons.
Okay.
And I think it was actually the Flying Miata guide that I followed, or at least partway to blank off the power steering in this conversion.
Okay. Yeah, that was my next question is what about other sort of creature comforts? AC, other sorts of like vehicle systems, are they going to stay in place?
Yeah, so most of the vehicle systems are going to stay in place. The 12-volt systems for sure.
Hmm.
The So we touched on the power steering. I'm just going to do a very common mod for the Miatas and depower the steering, but not changing anything else there. The the brakes are kind of a big one for a lot of EV conversions. The brake booster is usually vacuum fed, right? And without an engine to create vacuum, EVs generally have a pump that does it. So I can't even remember where I borrowed a pump from, but yeah, I found a used part online
Oh,
and
cool.
just grabbed it off eBay and then ran some vacuum line over to make sure the brakes are working as designed mostly. And yeah, heating and AC. Well, I'm in Hawaii, so I'm not too worried about heat. Plenty warm year round. And if not, I can go find a hoodie to put on. The
Lucky
AC,
duck.
yeah, yeah, especially right now as the rest of the country starts to freeze.
Right.
Um, yeah, AC, I definitely want AC. I did take the compressor off of a Leaf along with most of the drivetrain and have plans to incorporate that, but that's
Hmm.
kind of, again, creature comfort, that'll come towards the end. But so yeah,
Like
in
phase
the
two.
end, yeah, in the end, build should be uh, pretty indistinguishable driving from a different Miata. Just no heat, and yeah, AC may work a little differently, but it should still cool the car off.
Sweet. So, Miatas being a platform that are just so well loved, not only for motorsport, but, they're notoriously well handling. There's lots of aftermarket parts. There's lots of them built for just, regular wear parts. So that made it a
Right.
little easier to source things for your build when you're looking for things to repair and reuse and whatnot.
Um, Actually, at this point, not as much as I expected. Um, the the frame that I found, the body that I found already had coilovers installed.
Hmm.
The guy had been planning to race it, so he had done some of that tuning um, or adjustments that he was preparing for, and I think that's going to be really useful when I get towards the end of the build and kind of need to adjust ride height, front or rear, or anything else. Um,
Yeah.
so
And
I'm glad
increased
that's in
weight too,
there.
right?
Yeah, it should be a slightly increased weight. I haven't done the exact math on it, but especially since it was already missing a transmission and engine when I got it. But
Mm.
it'll probably pick up 200 or 300 pounds over stock, which should still be pretty lightweight.
Yeah, that's not bad.
Yeah.
So if you would have got one with a transmission, would you have investigated like a Hyper 9 route to hook up directly to it? Or did you always like say, look, here's a drivetrain from a Leaf. That's a good fit. I want to go with that.
I probably would have looked at the Hyper 9, but and I gotta admit, I did look at that as a possibility, but um, I started looking at the goals of what I'm trying to do in the future and really felt that reusing parts, especially parts that are headed to the junkyard,
Mm,
especially electrical parts and batteries that are headed for the junkyard, are really things that I wanted to get out of the waste stream and see if I could reuse. Um, and so affordability and availability really led me to using a Leaf drivetrain for that.
that's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then it was just a matter of making it fit. And there seemed to be a fair amount of folks that are trying to make Leaf motors fit in a bunch of things. So that support's been as expected. It's not, I can't go anywhere, but there are folks that are doing all kinds of things with Leaf motors and inverters that are really helpful.
So where are you in the progress right now? Have you done mock-ups? Is it bolted up at this point? Do you know if you got lucky and like, wow, that just lined up perfectly? Or is there some head scratchers?
There's some head scratchers, and when I started this whole thing, I knew there was going to be a lot of head scratching.
Okay.
I did not have a detailed plan. I had a broad
Hmm.
plan of how I was going to try and make it work.
Like
So
an
I gave
approach,
myself,
just a broad approach.
yeah, just broad approach.
Okay.
I knew space was going to be an issue, especially with Miata. But really, all I needed was the battery, some electronic controls, and the motor and inverter. Um, and I was planning to use the space where the gas tank was. The trunk was available. I'm trying not to use it. And so at this point, it's been a lot of trial and test fit. I think I'm about halfway there, both on the build and on my schedule.
Okay.
Gave myself a year, and I've got the rear. I essentially split the battery pack in half. With the Nissan Leaf battery pack, that's pretty easy. They've got it split into three parts. Essentially, it's 25%, 25%, and 50%
Okay.
that are all bolted together. So, so I took the two 25%, just kind of rearrange them and have them sitting over the rear subframe and up into where the gas tank was. Did require a little sheet metal cutting. That's installed. It's wired. It's not pretty, and one of the first things I'm gonna do when it's time to kind of do some upgrades is to replace the battery pack as a whole, but specifically the design of that rear pack.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. I've seen other folks, and there's always iteration. You got to kind of get it
Yep.
in there, make sure it works, and
Yep.
then you can kind of like arrange it from there. It's maybe a silly example, but I remember building computers from scratch,
Mhm.
back in the day, and you kind of got to wire things up to make sure that it works and make sure that you can turn it on. Then you can
Yep.
power it off and do the wire tuck and get it all, pretty from there.
Yeah. No, I remember exactly the same thing. You buy a PCI card,
Yep.
but it's just a little too big to fit in that slot, or it's only powers up when it's in this other slot, or whatever it might be. Yeah, it's a lot of that. Yeah, and so I guess to be specific, um, for when the next build happens, essentially, I'd the battery pack in the back would be 2x2 square, um, with the leads and the terminals kind of in the middle, uh, along the axis of the car, and then 6 modules high. So it would be 24 modules in the back. It's what I've got now, just arranged a little differently. But for anybody who's looking to do that to a Miata, that will fit. Um, you just yeah, got to cut some sheet metal.
Nice. Take notes, everyone.
Yeah, it goes right between the frame rails, and the things that are back there. Yeah, right above the subframe.
So, um, maybe almost bridging the topic here between building computers and tuning cars, right? So you had to come up with or determine how you were going to control the this Leaf motor and the inverter.
Right.
What did you end
Right.
up going with for that? And, how did you kind of arrive there?
Yeah. So I ended up um, going with essentially the hacking community. Uh, it's there's a website called openinverter.org. It's a group of folks. There's a couple of main personalities that have done a lot of the background and stuff over the past 10 or 15 years. But yeah, I said there are printed circuit boards that are available through them for several EV inverters, to include the Leaf. So you can just jump on and order it like it's a regular shopping site, and a circuit board shows up that you've got to do a little soldering or a little build, but yeah, just able to install that way. And if you're really a hobbyist, you can download the design files off of GitHub, and maybe make some changes of your own, contribute back to community. Uh, so yeah, so a really interesting uh, project and availability there. There's a couple other things that are available. One of the most common ways to control the Leaf inverter is using the native CAN bus from the Leaf architecture, and just sending the commands over the CAN. But I chose to go a different route,
Oh,
because
interesting.
yeah, because and the open inverter board actually will accept the CAN bus commands.
Okay.
Um, but I didn't want to dive into the CAN bus too much. Um, and an open inverter allows either or. You can either use the CAN bus for throttle commands, um, or some direct hard wires potentiometer for the throttle and things like that. The other neat thing about the open inverter board is there's a web interface for the board where you actually go in and can adjust a whole bunch of parameters. So for the motor itself, for the inverter, you can use the inverter in reverse as a battery charger from AC to DC.
Oh,
Uh,
really?
there's all kinds of things available on the open inverter. So um, So yeah, so exciting for me. One of the guys in the forums has actually increased the power output from that Leaf motor and inverter from 80 kilowatts to 130 kilowatts, or probably even more by now. So that was
That's a
definitely
big jump.
appealing. It
Yeah.
is. It is. And yeah, and it requires nothing more than a little tweaking of the settings. Uh, yeah, it's pretty interesting um, what the Leaf motor is capable of. And yeah, actually, if the motor itself is the same the motor that they're putting in the Leafs today is the same motor that they were putting in starting in 2013.
Oh,
And
really?
the windings and the magnets were actually pretty much the same in the 2011 and 2012 models too. So the motor hasn't changed. The inverter's gone up through some upgrades, uh, and the open inverter communities, I think, figured out what some of those upgrades were, and are able to share them. And yeah, once things are spinning and installed, I'll be looking forward to tweaking some of those settings myself.
Yeah, that's super, super cool. And the idea that you can kind of make adjustments in software, uh, that's pretty appealing too. Uh,
Yep.
talk about, easy tuning.
Right. Right. And yeah, one thing I'm not sure about, when you look at the internal combustion engines and ECU mapping,
Hmm.
and mapping all those fuel ratios along the RPMs. Yeah, I'm not sure that there's really a comparison for the electric motors, uh, but I'll find out eventually.
Yeah, right. As far as the interface,
Mhm.
and in ease of updates, maybe that's where we can draw the comparison. I remember
Right.
there was, so back when I was tuning my old Eclipse, it was a 99. I barely was the cutoff for the ECU that you could that would take flashing. And this
Right.
is like very, well-worn territory for the Subaru folks and the Evo folks, where they can just reflash the ECU with different maps and kind of change it on the fly. But it was really cool.
Yeah.
You didn't have to deal with changing out any hardware, didn't have to piggyback onto the ECU or anything like that, didn't have to spoof signals from the math, the airflow sensor or anything. You just kind of swap it. And I thought that was great. And so the ability to toggle switches, almost like overclocking a computer a little bit, I
Yep.
think is a good
Yep.
way to think about it.
Yeah. No, and that I think both of those are pretty good analogies with what they've done with the Leaf inverter. If you start adjusting the magnetic fields, the timing, the strength, um, some of the other pieces that are there, and you can coax a little bit more out of that. And I think the other piece is, well, and I'm not sure, so I'm kind of hypothesizing here.
Sure.
As an OEM, Nissan was probably really conservative with their hardware capacity.
Yeah.
So the hardware was probably very capable, or is very capable, but they put software limits in on how much current you're going to draw and power you're going to generate. Um, so with the open inverter board, you can kind of loosen up those limits, uh, and hopefully not too much.
Yeah, makes sense. So if you're turning up the kilowatt, the power a little bit to that motor, probably going to break the wheels loose.
I anticipate I probably will. So, um,
And that's fun.
yeah, it should be fun. Yeah, and certainly the guy that did it, he did it in I think it was a Subaru BRZ, right? So a similar design,
Oh,
a
really?
little bigger, but I think he kept the transmission, and so he was able to shift and change gears. But yeah, he was definitely smoking tires. Not sure what gear he was in, but yeah, it'll be capable. Uh, my build right now, I'm planning to not keep the gear shifter. So even though it'll have a transmission, it'll be running as a single speed.
Sure.
It seemed the cheapest and most flexible way to get the gear reduction right,
Hmm.
that's necessary to get usable power to the wheels and take advantage of all the RPMs from the motor.
You gonna do any other kind of hardening to the drive system to take all of that torque, or anything fun to that rear diff? I think you might have said
Yeah,
maybe you're considering a LSD or something.
yeah. In fact, more than considering, I already have the LSD installed.
Oh, okay, nice.
So that should, yeah, in anticipation that I'll be breaking loose, um, pretty much at will. I thought that'd be a good upgrade, to install. Everything else, I'll kind of use until it breaks. But I don't think anything will break at this point, with the motor and inverter I've got. I think everything will handle it. But yeah, I took and I went to one of the car clubs and was talking to some folks just about what I was trying to do. And yeah, everybody I was talking to was like, "Hey, you got to take it down to the SCCA events. You got to come
Oh
down to
yeah.
the when we track them, and we got to see how this thing does." I'm like, okay, well, I can't make it this weekend, but this date next year, I'll try and be there.
That'll be awesome. So at this point, man, it seems like it's really going good. But have you run into challenges along the way? What were some of the big ones as people I bet are listening going like, man, I think I could do that. It sounds
Yeah,
easy.
it does sound fairly easy. Um, and I knew there would be challenges along the way, and that's kind of why I wanted to do this. I have this bigger picture of being able to do conversions like this regularly, do something that's fun, cheap, using the reused parts. Um, but the challenges that I've had so far, one, uh, lithium batteries, shipping those is a bigger challenge than I anticipated.
Hmm.
In looking for a battery that would fit, and I was kind of leaning towards the Leaf battery for a long time. I actually found a couple in California. When I got the shipping quote, it was more than what the battery cost.
Wow.
So, lithium batteries aren't cheap to begin with, but more than doubling the price to ship it, just meant I needed to find batteries that were already here.
Yeah,
So that was a challenge, but there's a fair amount of wrecked EVs here, and folks that have upgraded batteries. So I got a pretty good deal on them. The other challenge that I've had is finding fabrication
mm,
guys. I was actually surprised. I haven't really pushed too hard, but I did call a couple of shops, that I thought would be interested. Some guys that do things for the four wheeling community out here. Everybody drives a Toyota. Everybody's done something to it, mostly
uh-huh.
raised it up a foot or two. So I thought those guys would be interested, or a shop like that. I called a custom chopper shop, right? They do the motorcycle frames. I thought that would be a good fit for kind of the size of what I wanted. I'm not trying to construct a whole frame, but maybe some motor mounts,
Hmm.
maybe the battery box. But they weren't interested either. There's a neighbor that's supposedly a hobbyist, and we talked a few times, but haven't been able to get him over to the house. So at this point, I need to find somebody. I've got the rear battery done. I don't want to do the front battery until I'm sure I've got the motor and the transmission mounted securely, in place, and I understand what space is available for that front battery,
Sure.
because it's probably going to sit above the motor in the engine bay. But until I get that motor mounted, I'm not really sure how much space I'm working with.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's what I'm looking for. Probably as soon as the new year starts.
Hmm.
We're in mid-December as we record this. So once the holidays, everybody's back, I'll start looking for somebody to fabricate some things over at the house.
Now, when you talk to folks, are they just slammed busy, or did you ruffle some feathers? Because that's how you know you're doing something real good. Is if people go, oh, I can't believe you're doing. No, 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 no. Then
Yeah,
yeah, you're onto something.
Yeah, it wasn't quite received like that. It was like, oh, we only do repairs. We only work on trucks or motorcycles.
Mm,
Yeah, a couple of folks, hey, I'm really busy. I can't make it. Um, yeah, nobody's the I did find one guy, right? So one of the pieces that is needed when you start looking at mating an electric motor to a transmission is how you're going to do the coupling.
hmm.
Right, you've got an output shaft coming out of the electric motor, input shaft going into the transmission, and ideally you have either a solid coupling or some coupling that's got a little bit of play in it, just to kind of hopefully save your bearings. Um, I went the direction of a solid coupling. Um, there's a guy online has a small company called Brat Industries. It's focused around Subaru Brat. He's doing the electric conversion, but he's saving all these templates and doing some designs focused on the Leaf
Oh,
motor.
cool.
And so he's building and selling essentially their half done couplers.
Hmm.
So it's 6 or 8 inches of metal, cylindrical. He's got the splines done on one side that'll made up with the Leaf motor, and then you find some way to get the splines for the transmission you're using onto that coupler. Um, the way he recommends seems easiest is if you're using a manual transmission, you find a clutch disc, you cut out the splines that are in the center of the clutch disc, and then you kind of, I don't know, do the metalwork special things that I don't understand. And eventually you end up with a press fitted, welded solid um, spline for the clutch disc on the other end of this coupler. And
Easy.
then, yeah, it sure sounds easy, but I don't have any experience in that. But the guy I talked to, yeah, gave me a hard time. Wanted to make sure I knew what I was doing. Wanted to make sure that what he understood what I was trying to do. Um, and I thought I wasn't sure I was going to get him to do it. But yeah, after 10 minutes of talking story with him, he's like, oh, yeah, we'll got this. No problem. Easy. I was like, great. I got to take a little trip. I'll be back in a week. Came back in a week. It's done. As far as I can tell, it fits perfectly. It's just what I imagined.
Awesome.
And yeah, and so I'm looking forward to getting it, um, the transmission and the motor mated up. Yeah, I'm working on getting the adapter plates made now so I can bolt that all together. But the actual coupler that gets those two shafts mated is done. That was exciting for me.
Yeah. Now you said transmission. You're using a Leaf transmission, right? Or are you using
Oh
a
my gosh.
and
So
because you're not using the Miata 5 speed.
yeah, this yeah, this is a long story. I get. I'll try to make it short. Um, the initial thought, and you probably seen if you've seen a lot of builds, you've probably seen folks do this. Is they take the whole drive unit, whether it's Tesla or a Leaf. It's got the motor, the inverter. It's got the reduction gears down to the differential and axles coming out,
Hmm.
and they take that whole unit and drop it into a different platform.
Drop it in. Yep.
Yeah, just drop it in. uh, I wanted to do something similar, and I really felt there was the space to do it with that Leaf drive unit and the rear subframe. So that was my initial goal. Took the rear subframe out, had the Leaf unit together, and tried to make things fit. Um, I couldn't figure out how to do it. Started talking to folks online, and they're like, "Yeah, that's not going to fit. You can
Oh.
do a whole custom subframe and custom suspension geometry." And I'm like,
Hmm.
"Oh, that is not what I had in mind for this project." Um, and I think I mentioned that when I picked up the Miata, it didn't have a transmission.
Right.
So So yeah, so I couldn't do the whole drive unit swap in, didn't have a transmission. So I just kind of jumped on jumped on Craigslist and Facebook and watched see if anybody had a Miata transmission. Uh, we'll skip that half of the story. The short answer is no. Nobody
No.
had a Miata transmission. Nobody in this world has a Miata transmission that I could get my hands on.
Oh, they're hard
But
to find now.
yeah, I guess so. Um, but what I did find was somebody who was a BMW fan, um, had been, yeah, taking his stripped down 3 Series out to SCCA. He did have a spare transmission, um, that was having problems going into fifth, which I'm like, I'm never gonna. That's not what I'm gonna do with this project. I'm never gonna shift gears, and certainly not never gonna see fifth. And he was selling it for $20. Um,
That's a good deal.
so that was hard to say no to.
Yeah.
And he included the clutch, an old clutch, right, that I needed the splines for. Um, and so I'm getting there. I have a transmission. It almost fits in the Miata. The bell housing is a little bigger than I wanted it to be. So I think what I'm going to have to do is just have that transmission sit a little further forward than I wanted it to. Um, but other than that, yeah, it's the Gertrag transmission from an E36, so like 80s era BMWs. But yeah, the bolt pattern and the transmissions, they were used for 15 or 20 years, 80s through the 90s. So fairly common. And yeah, hopefully some of the work that I'm doing here can share some of those CAD files on what that looks like, what that bell housing looks like, so folks can find them and make their own adapters, or find somebody who can make them, which is what I'm trying to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, at the end of this, you'll have expertise in Miata and BMW conversions just by nature.
Yeah, yeah, and I've had BMWs too, and I love those cars, and yeah, I love those transmissions. So I'm a little disappointed. I'm not planning to actually shift it, but yeah, well, I'm glad to have that a fairly solid transmission in
Yeah. So then, once the Miata is all done, do you have
there.
another build in mind already? Is it maybe
Uh,
a BMW?
I do have another build in mind, but it's not a BMW. And for some reason, well, I bought another Nissan Leaf from one of those salvage auctions,
Okay.
um, with the intent to use it for the next build. Um, just to keep it short and answer the question, planning on a Toyota truck or F-150 as the next conversion.
Cool.
Um, Hoping to work some four-wheel drive aspect to it, but two-wheel drive or four-wheel drive, I'll take whatever's cheap and on the market when I'm ready. And we'll probably use the Leaf I have and its drivetrain and battery for the initial setup. That again won't be a good setup. What I'm really hoping for is to either find a Tesla battery pack.
Hmm.
Yeah, something 60 to 80 kilowatt hours, I think, is the size that I would want to have for a truck conversion. Uh, just aerodynamic inefficiencies, or something that can't be overcome without a little more size in the
Yeah.
battery pack. Um, and I don't need to worry too much about range being here on Oahu. You can only drive around the island so many times. Um, yeah, and
Before
I think that'll be,
recharging.
yeah, yeah. Before just getting bored, I don't need to do another trip around the island. Let's just go home and charge it.
So as we're wrapping down here, do you have any advice for those out there that might be interested in driving or building or tuning EVs? How they might get into it? What they should do if they don't really know where to start?
Yeah, if you want to drive an EV, like get down to the dealership. I would look for a used EV. I'm all about used cars more over new cars just for value. Uh, the dealers there are really um, really developing how to talk to people about EVs.
Mm.
Um, for the building and tuning, there are some pretty strong communities that I've joined. There's a DIYelectriccar.com, which is kind of forum based. I talked about the openinverter.org, which is has another resource. It's not just for the inverters, but anything you might be trying to do on the conversions.
Oh,
And
cool.
then there's a there's a couple other. There's so many to name. There are a lot of conversion shots that are popping up, and so it's really modernizing from 10, 20 years ago where we had talked about earlier, forklift motors and lead acid batteries. Now there's shops out there that'll they've got their own supply line for electric motors. They'll build their own batteries, and they'll really help you customize if you have the budget for it.
Sure.
And if you don't have the budget, they can help with some of the design work, is what I've found. I've talked to a couple of those shops for just tips and advice. They sell small pieces. Um, as an example, I've got they call what do they call it? Main control unit. Essentially, it does the battery management system,
Hmm.
as well as provide controls for displays. I bought that from Thunderstruck Motors, and yeah, we'll use that in pairing with the open inverter stuff. That's pretty much all I'm using for all the control for displays, for the batteries, for power, all that kind of stuff.
Very cool. Love to hear about that kind of growing community and different places to look. So with that, I think we got to wrap up for today. But thank you so much for sharing the process and your insights and expertise. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Dan. I'm really glad to be here. And I appreciate support from the community that I've seen online. I look forward to hearing your podcast and the other folks that are on it and whoever comes next. And yeah, checking out all the other builds. It's really a fun time.
Likewise, it's really exciting. I think we're right at the beginning of some good stuff. Thanks again. We'll talk to you soon.
All right, aloha.